Hello Internet, Seth Skorikowski, and today we'll be talking about the Call of Cthulhu scenario, Missed Dues. Written by Mike Mason, the scenario appears in the 7th edition Keeper Screen Pack. Not including the pre-generated characters, the scenario comes to 20 pages, but it is still playable in a single session. It takes place in Arkham, Massachusetts, which a color map of that comes with the Keeper Screen Pack, either a fold-out map or a PDF, depending on which version it is you have, and while it does reference the Arkham source book, Keepers will not need that book. The scenario is best played if the player characters are criminals themselves, living in the seedy underbelly of Arkham, and for that we get 6 pre-generated characters. Now, we do not need to actually use these pre-gens. I think a keeper can work most investigators from their normal campaign into this scenario, providing that they owe a favor to a local mob boss, which he then calls them in on. So maybe this boss could have helped them out on a previous adventure, maybe smuggling in or smuggling out some sort of rare artifacts, or maybe he helped them dispose of some cultist corpses, or maybe he just has some great blackmail material on them, or maybe this mob boss is just simply called them in with an offer that they can't refuse, in return for some favor from him at some point in the future. Now, I ran this adventure using the pre-generated characters, and it was a lot of fun, because normally our player characters are upstanding and academic characters, and the flip of having player characters that were really weak in certain areas that we're used to having them be strong in, and they were very strong in areas that we're used to our characters normally being weak in, that was a lot of fun, and I think it works best for this scenario if the player characters are themselves criminals. So what I'm going to do here is offer my criticisms and my suggestions as a game master who has successfully run this adventure.
And I'm Jack the NPC. I'm going to give this one to you from a player's side of things. Also, we get to visit some of Arkham's speakeasies here, so I am totally down for this adventure.
But from this moment forward, there will be spoilers. So any players out there in the audience, you should stop now. But do send your game masters this way to see if Missed Dues might be a fun adventure for you. Okay, Keepers, let's get this thing started. The scenario opens as the player characters are called to the office of local crime boss, Mordecai the Hammer O'Leary. The module references some of the other mobsters that are operating in Arkham and the Arkham source book and how O'Leary fits into that criminal hierarchy, but if you don't have the Arkham book or if you don't want to incorporate the Arkham book, that's completely fine, you do not need to. The only thing that matters is that O'Leary is a crime boss that's operating in Arkham, and he is the crime boss that the player characters are dealing with. None of the other crime bosses are going to matter for this scenario. If the players are using the pre-generated characters, the module provides a very large dialogue box of what O'Leary says during this opening meeting. But Keepers, instead of just reading this all out to them word for word, just really stick to the highlights. All the player characters at this meeting either owe O'Leary a huge favor or have screwed up monumentally in the past and are in his debt. O'Leary has heard rumors that there's a local burglar in the area named Sticky Jack, and he got hired to pull off 3 thefts in one night, and that was 1 week ago. However, that week is now passed, and Sticky Jack has not come by to pay O'Leary his cut, his dues for performing crimes in O'Leary's turf. And now O'Leary wants the PCs to find Sticky Jack and get those dues. The job, because it is sort of hidden in this huge text of dialogue box that we're given, is pretty simple. The characters must find out what was actually stolen, find out who hired Sticky Jack for this job, and get O'Leary his cut, or get O'Leary the stolen merchandise, but most of all, get answers. And with that, the player characters are given 1 week. To emphasize these points, you could have O'Leary either count them out on his fingers as he's given them, you need to do this and this and this, or for more dramatic purposes, you could actually have him lay out 4 walnuts onto his desk, and as he gives each point, he smashes it with his trademark claw hammer to really drive the point home that he is a man that is serious.
You got it, boss, right away. We will get you what you need, and you can consider our debt completely paid off. No need to use that hammer on me. Just consider me your #1 guy.
After the meeting, the player characters can go out and start getting some questions answered about Sticky Jack and who he is. Now, some of this information they don't even need a roll for. We just simply role play it out as they're asking these questions about Sticky Jack. Now, for my game, what I did is I had each of the player characters have a specific contact in town that they could ask. So then we role played out the whole act of them going out and finding their contact and asking that contact certain questions like that. Now, that was just for the freebie information. For the stuff that required that the player character roll, persuade or intimidate or anything like that. That required that they actually had to go out and find people they didn't know, possibly at some of the different locations around town, like the speakeasies. Now, among the easy ones is learning about Jack's best friend, Greasy Spoon. While learning of Greasy Spoon's existence is fine if you do that early on, having the player characters meet Greasy Spoon too early into the adventure can be a bit problematic, because Greasy Spoon can send the player characters off to the grand finale at the apartment long before the players are ready to go there. So my idea here is that Spoon actually helped Jack out with the job, just performing lookout, no big deal, but he was there that night, and he was well aware of the job that Jack did for it. But he hasn't seen Jack since then, so Greasy Spoon's a little worried and he's been laying low. So if the player characters go out to Greasy Spoon's normal haunts, he's not going to be there, and it's going to be a lot harder for them to find him. Then, if the game does start stalling later on because the player characters feel like they're out of leads, that's when you could bring Greasy Spoon back in. You could kind of nudge the game along and keep it going and keep everybody having fun. The scenario really uses the map of Arkham, referencing all the street addresses to all the different locations that the player characters can visit, and I think that's a lot of fun, and I really do appreciate that. Now, thankfully, the Keeper Screen Pack does come with a fold-out map or a high-resolution PDF map if that's the version you got. So with this, the player characters can then scour the map, finding the streets and really exploring Arkham. I love this, but my only complaint with the map is that the important part, the map itself, sort of gets lost due to the giant border around it, which makes the map portion a little bit smaller and harder to read than it should be. Now, the PDF that's in the Arkham book has a nice black and white version that is a much higher resolution, and that lets you to get really in and read all the street names a lot easier, which I'm going to use that map in this video, but either version works for the scenario itself. Just the important part is that keepers give your players copies of this map. That way they can kind of go through the map and try to search for the different locations as they come up during the adventure. Now, the rest of the investigation is pretty simple. We visit a couple speakeasies, we get some newspaper articles that they can find, and of course we can visit all the crime scenes. This part was actually a lot of fun for us because my player characters were using these criminal characters, and they were nothing like their normal Call of Cthulhu investigators.
Oh yeah, when we're playing academics and detectives in a normal Call of Cthulhu game, asking people questions and interviewing professors, that part is easy for us. But when we're playing bootleggers and killers and thugs, that was a different story entirely. The last time my character went to a college campus was to boost a car, and the last time he visited a library was to use the can. So this added an unexpected hurdle for us.
For example, instead of going to the library or the newspaper offices in order to get the copies of these week-old papers, my player characters visited the barbershop because they figured the barbershop's always got old papers lying around, so they should go there and just pick up a couple of old papers. And visiting Miskatonic University, that made them very uncomfortable because they really stuck out.
Are those security guys following us again? I am really uncomfortable being here, guys.
Eventually, the player characters are going to learn several details. The stolen items included a Native American dagger and an ancient Greek scroll, but neither of those items was worth that very much. And the third item that was stolen was a professor's personal translation of the Greek scroll, and if they talk to the professor, he's going to tell them that it wasn't worth that much because the scroll just translated out to a bunch of gobbledygook anyway, and it really wasn't worth a damn thing. They also get to learn that a local church, the Temple of Hope, might be involved in this case. The church is led by an out-of-towner named Jacob Smith. Smith leads a small congregation on the corner of East College and Powder Mill, and if they go to check it out, they'll get to have a chance to see one of its services, which is a hellfire and brimstone sermon, which I strongly encourage you to perform for your players.
Brothers and sisters, you all need hope to survive, for without it you are nothing more than automatons, soulless bodies that have no meaning. Reach into your hearts and seek the hope within, for soon the darkness will descend and burn mankind from this planet. If you are not prepared, then you shall burn too. I bring you hope, brothers and sisters. I can heal your heart and let you see the universe beyond. For beyond here, at the center of all things, a burning, purifying flame at the heart of the cosmos. And if we hold true and let that purifying flame embrace us and fill us, we will be saved while the rest of mankind is burned to ashes. Call with me, brothers and sisters. Call with me the words of hope, the words of power. Ia, Ea, Lord of Hope, Vatagan, Ea, Azathoth, Ea, Lord of Hope, Vatagan, Ea, Azathoth, Lord of Hope, Vatagan, Azathoth,
Now, Smith is the villain of this scenario. He is a cultist of Azathoth, and if the player characters ask him about Sticky Jack, that's going to tip him off that they're looking for him as well, and that's going to get him more actively involved in this scenario. If the player characters break into his church at night or at some point, they can find Sticky Jack's apartment address hidden in a drawer somewhere. Now, Jack lives at 22 Curzon Street, which is said to be off of Walnut. The problem is that while all of the other locations are very easy to spot on the map, Curzon Street is not. In fact, when you zoom in on Walnut, there is no Curzon Street on the Arkham map at all. Now, this really annoyed me at first because nowhere in the module did it tell you, that give you a heads up that you weren't going to find Curzon Street. After all, I really did like the ability for my players to search the map and be able to find all the different locations that they were going to, and having a very plot important street address not on this map that I was giving my players, that did bug me a bit. But at the same time, you can have a lot of fun incorporating this into the game. Curzon Street is really more of a dead-end alley. It's such a crappy little road that it doesn't even appear on any of the maps, and that way the player characters are going to have to physically go to Walnut and walk up and down the street before they can spot this little crappy street, and you can have a little bit of fun with that. I really just wish that the module gave a heads up to the game masters before the adventure. That way I could work that in and not be kind of wondering myself, why the hell is Curzon Street not on here? For my game, I placed Sticky Jack's apartment here. Keepers, you can choose to do it wherever you like, or even change the address if you want your players to be able to find it on the map. You don't even have to do it on Curzon Street. The apartment is the big scene for this scenario. Now, what happened is last week, after Sticky Jack completed his triple job, he returned back to his apartment to lay low for the night. And while he was there, he had picked up this dagger and he was reading this translated scroll that he had done, and he was reading out loud because he isn't that good at reading, kind of moving this dagger around. But meanwhile, Jacob Smith, who had hired him for this job, he didn't want to pay Sticky Jack back for all this work that he did. So Jacob Smith sent a couple of his goons in there in order to rough Jack up, possibly kill him, and get those items for Smith. And when those two goons pushed their way into Sticky Jack's door, he threw out his arms to defend himself, and that completed the ritual that he'd inadvertently been doing, which summoned the god Azathoth into the apartment, the supreme, mindless god at the center of the universe. So for the past week, the apartment has been trapped into the chaos of Azathoth's dreaming, and reality has gone completely bye-bye. But from the outside, the apartment itself looks completely normal.
Keepers, the only hodpod here is getting all of your player characters inside the apartment. Once they're inside, they're going to be trapped until the scenario's completion. But anyone that's outside, doing lookout or anything like that, they're going to miss out on all that excitement.
The module suggests that you could use cries for help from either the PCs or some NPCs that are coming from inside, maybe kind of encourage any player characters outside to go inside. Or any player characters that outside might see Jacob Smith and a couple of his goons go inside the apartment, because maybe Jacob Smith had some guys out there doing lookout and they see the player characters going in, or maybe the player characters tipped Jacob Smith off that they were going to be involved, so now he's going inside. So any PC outside might go inside to warn their friends. Or you could have O'Leary and a few of his goons show up, and because he maybe got a separate tip of where Sticky Jack is, and he didn't really totally trust the player characters to do this job right. So when he shows up, he sees this PC waiting outside, and he's all like, "You, go in there and get me my dues." Or maybe he sees the PC outside and he's like, "You, on me, we're going to go in and we're going to get my money." So that way he orders them to go inside if the player character might not want to go inside on their own. Inside the apartment should feel very weird, but for the first floor, with the exception of the psychotic housewife that invites them in for tea, I made the ground floor of the building seem fairly normal until they started going up the stairs, and that's when everything got completely crazy on them. The module does not provide any sort of map of what this building looks like, and the reason for that being is that the building no longer follows any sort of earthly physics, and it's going to be changing everything it will, or at least at the game master's whim. So there's no real need for them to provide you with a map, because you could literally make up anything that you want. Hallways are going to be growing longer or shorter, stairs are going to be going up and leading back to the same floor that they started on. gravity is going to go sideways or affecting everybody differently. Have fun with it, maybe channel the movie Inception. For my game, I had 2 different stairwells in the building, one at the front and one at the back. That way the players might have to go up one and not be able to go up any higher, because then it keeps bringing them back to the same floor. It just stretches up to infinity. So then they would have to cross the floor and go up the other one. Personally, I found it a lot easier to map out what the apartment building looked like before it got involved with Azathoth, and then I could warp it back and forth from there, but I could use that kind of as that template spot or my starting point, so I personally found it easier to have a map of the building before you begin. Once my players figured out that they were trapped, the player characters decided to try to get out of this building. Now, one of them went to the front door where there was a big pane of glass in it, and you could see the street outside all lit under the sun, and everything looked nice and pretty, and the wind blowing through the trees. So he ends up shooting the glass out, trying to break it to crawl out through the window. But as the glass shattered away, it suddenly revealed the black infinite void of space beyond it, and that player then got sucked out through the door. And all the characters, they're holding on for dear life, making strength checks and dex checks to grab something in time. And then all of a sudden that suction stopped and the curtains fall back into place, and that pane of glass is returned, showing a nice view of the street outside. And then meanwhile, that PC or PCs that got sucked outside, they just got dropped into a random room somewhere else in the apartment, and then they had to call for each other and kind of run around trying to figure out where each other are. So that allowed us to be able to start using the different rooms, just because they broke a window somewhere and now they're in a random room up on the 3rd floor. Also, as I mentioned earlier, Jacob Smith could show up here, and I recommend that you go ahead and have him show up if the PCs haven't dealt with him yet, because for us it led to a really fun sort of cat and mouse game as the PCs are trying to make it through this crazy apartment, and then you've got these other people there that are trying to kill them. So they would have these little fights or try to avoid each other, then gravity would switch and some people would get sucked further away, or the hallway would get longer, and ranges on firearms are all screwing up. So it became a fun little game for us and added a lot more excitement, more than just the player characters going through some sort of fun house that's changing and warping all around them, because the players can actually get a little tired of that. The module provides a few different room encounters, and keepers, you don't need to use all of these, or you could make up your own. It doesn't really matter. The important part is that you really need to watch your players and make sure that they're still engaged and they're having fun inside the apartment and they don't become frustrated or bored. Now, Jack's apartment they're going to find on the top floor. Inside, things are going to be super weird. Angles are all going to be wrong. The walls are going to be breathing. There's going to be this strange music that's coming from somewhere. And on the wall, they're going to find the smoldering remains of the 2 goons that came in here and disrupted Jack when he was reading the thing. So they're going to be kind of like glowing with embers. It might be like blue and pink embers. Or maybe you could make it look like that scene at the very beginning of Bright, where it's kind of alien and strange. Just make this weird and make this scary. Inside of Jack's apartment, they're going to find 2 doors. One of those doors leads to Azathoth's court, where flying squid monsters fly around the dreaming god, keeping him asleep with their insane music.
Oh my God, the horror! And also the worst music of all time!
Keepers, the sight of Azathoth can be absolutely devastating to a PC SAN. Even if they make their sanity roll, they're still going to have to roll a 1d10 just for viewing this god. And if they fail their sanity roll, they're going to have to roll a 1 to 100 sanity loss, which is more than enough to drive even the best investigator completely and permanently insane. So what you might want to do is give them a few hints before they open this door and do this to themselves. Give them a few hints that this might be a bad idea. How I did it is, as the player characters were getting closer and closer to the door which Azathoth was behind, they could feel these kind of ripples of chaos coming off of it. You had to do a couple POW checks, and then there were SAN checks the closer that they got, because it was so maddening and so strange. And then as they reached for the door, they could feel this kind of unseen tether kind of moving out from the door around into the other door. And as their hand passed through the tether, the skin started stretching out, like it was like the flesh was being pulled by an invisible string, and that was actually trying to lead them to the other door. Now, behind the other door is where Sticky Jack is, and he is the anchor to keeping Azathoth's court here, so that was a good way to represent that maybe this isn't the door that they should open.
Yeah, just go ahead and tell them what really happened when you played it.
Yeah, so one of my players still opened the door even though I gave him all the warnings. He looked upon the idiot god and he failed his saving throw. So he had to roll sanity and he got an +1 on percentage dice, which was the lowest that he could possibly lose looking at this elder god. So he just kind of slammed the door shut and announced to everybody, "Do not go in there," like it was some sort of dirty bathroom or something. Now behind the second door is Sticky Jack, and he is in rough shape. There are papers whirling all around him. He has sliced himself up in an attempt to kill himself, but he cannot die, and he has gone completely insane. Now this nightmare ends once the player characters manage to kill Sticky Jack, but killing him is not going to be easy. The best way to do it is to read the words that are on the professor's translated note, which are in this room fluttering around somewhere. Though my players didn't figure this out right away, they just chose to stand there and just keep shooting him over and over and over again, somehow expecting that maybe that 15th bullet would kill him when the first 14 didn't do it at all. But eventually the music that had been playing this whole time drove one of them insane, and then they had an insane insight that maybe they should use some part of these different things floating around in order to kill Sticky Jack. Now, once Sticky Jack is dead, the apartment then returns to normal and the adventure is over. If the player characters have not dealt with Jacob Smith yet, they might have to, or they might get ordered to by their boss. But once they have all the answers and the goods, they can then return to O'Leary, and then the adventure is through. Overall, we had a lot of fun with Miss Dews. I think it is a great one-shot, and I really enjoyed the aspect of the player characters being criminals for this one. In fact, it could be worked in quite easily with the other scenario that's in the Keeper's Screen Pack, Blackwater Creek, because in that one, the player characters can be criminals as well. So a Keeper could use these two adventures maybe to launch off the beginning of a criminal-themed Call of Cthulhu campaign.
The big things that a Keeper needs to look out for in this adventure is 1. Not giving the player characters Greasy Spoon and therefore Jack's apartment number too early on in the adventure. 2, getting all of the player characters inside the apartment without it turning into a railroad. And 3, making that inside of the apartment seem strange and weird, but not completely hopeless and definitely not boring or feeling like it's at the Keeper's mercy.
And all that takes is a little bit of preparation before the game and a solid shot of improvisation once the game begins, because no amount of preparation is going to fully prepare you for whatever it is all the players and the PCs and their dice decide to do once the game starts. But overall, I give Miss Dews a big thumbs up. It was a lot of fun.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see some more of our stuff, such as game reviews or RPG philosophy, just hit that subscribe button. Till next time, gamers, you have a great day. You know, you left out the part where we burned that apartment to the ground after we left it.